Good evening to all of you. Tonight I want to talk about spiritual adaptation. So, adapting to spiritual things. Now, you might be surprised, but if I told you that I wasn't brought up in the church, would you believe that? Some of you would say absolutely. Some of you would, okay. Some of you already know, maybe just from prior lessons that I've talked about. But I was not brought up in the church. Every now and then, my aunt and uncle, Steve and Dana, would take me to church every now and then. But in reality, I was never brought up in the church. My parents didn't take me to church. When I met my wife in our dating period, I started going to church with her. And I had to adapt to something that was different and strange to me. And that was the church way of life. And I had to make a decision. You know, I could live my normal life, that it was, or I could adapt to the way of life that she obviously was living. Now, I would never say that I was a perfect kid, but I would never say I was a rotten kid. There's really good characteristics about me that I was proud of having, especially the way I was brought up. But in a sense, I still needed refined. I needed polished. I still had sins in my life, some things that just weren't right. Things I was shown that maybe I adapted to growing up were not the right way to be and act. So I had to adapt spiritually. Again, there was this girl, right? I had to impress her. So she said, we're going to church, we go to church. She told me not to say a cuss word. I didn't say a cuss word. You know, she didn't do that. That's a way of life, okay? If she said to act a certain way, that's what we did. Just because, again, that was the way the church did it. I had no idea that's what we're supposed to do. And more importantly, I had no idea why I'm supposed to do this. All I know that it was a different way of life that I was not accustomed to, that I, again, had to grow into. I was being told, I was learning some things, I was studying, and the Bible told me that I should live this way. Now, majority of all that it was, I had no difficulty changing. Again, a lot of attributes that I found out that I already had as a youth was a Christian way of life. I just didn't know it was Christ-like attitude. So it was, again, easy for me. Other things, it was a little bit difficult to change. Again, every now and then I might say a cuss word or something wrong. I never was a person that said abusive speech. Never was my thing. But growing up in the church, when I learned those things at 20 years old, I learned, okay, I need to bridle the tongue, as James talks about. So again, there was this adaptation. So majority of those things were easy for me. But I will admit there's some things that was a little difficult. When the Word of God said that we need to change certain things, I thought, okay, this is going to take some thought. This is going to take some focus. And more importantly, it's going to take some time. Because I was accustomed to doing certain things that now I'm not supposed to do anymore. But again, it was that adaptation, it was that changing. I went from one environment of life, and you could say that's the worldly environment, to now to a spiritual environment that had totally different outlook, purposes, and hope, and guidelines to do that. I want us to focus on 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Again, majority of us have read this before, but I want to point out some things tonight. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 19 here, Paul writes, "For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I may win more. To the Jews I became a Jew, so that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law, so that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I might win those who are without law." He says, "To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that I may by all means save some. I do all things for the sake of the gospel, so that I may become a fellow partaker of it." Now let me back up for just a moment here. Paul says right out the beginning here, though I'm free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I may win more. So that transition period in my life, going from a worldly environment to now a Christian, a Bible nerd environment, and that's what I thought back then, I have to make a transition here. But it's a choice. Okay? It was not something that anyone forced me to do. It's not something anyone told me, in a sense, I had to do. I had the free choice of doing this. What do I want? Okay? Paul says, I have made myself a slave to all. It's a choice that Paul did. Now, we're going to see later on the reason why Paul did that, because he doesn't just randomly say, I'm going to make myself a slave. Who would want to do that? who would want to make themselves a slave, deny themselves, in a sense, persecuted, pushing things away. But there's got to be a reason why you do that. You just don't do it naturally because you have a thrill to be a slave of something. There's a reason why we do this. Now, a couple of weeks ago, my family and I, we went down to Tennessee, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area. And when I was starting to tell people that, hey, we're going to go down here, a lot of people says, oh, that's an amazing place. You got to go. It's going to have fun. And do this and this and this. You got to see all these things. And I thought for just a moment, I think I told 10 people that I was going, and all 10 people had been there before. And I'm like, why have we never been to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg area? It's a beautiful place. Everybody goes there, and they go there all the time. But here we are, never been there, our first time. So you got to go down there. So you got to do this, and this, and this. We only had a couple days down there, a lot less time than we really wanted to. So we spent all this time down there, and about the number one thing that I noticed, other than, okay, the beautiful mountains and scenery, the number one that I took away coming back home about Tennessee is that those people, they talk funny. Really funny. And then, this is even fascinating, when we went to Dolly World, okay, we're leaving in this parking lot. And I thought, everywhere I went in Dolly World, someone talked funny. And I thought, okay, where are these people from? Dolly World. Do Tennesseans, do they come to Dolly World? So I'm looking at license plates as I go. And there's South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginians, and Kentuckians. And I'm like, where's all the Indianas, okay? There might have been one or two in there. But I thought, well, that explains it. No wonder these people talk weird. They're all from the South. And so then I started talking to my wife, and I said, do we talk funny? And she goes, yeah, I think we do. I said, I don't know if I do. You talk funny every now and then. And I pointed out a couple times where she talked funny. And I meant that southern tongue. And then I thought, did you hear those little kids? We were at Dolly World, these 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-olds, they talk like they had a southern accent. And I thought, they even talk funny. They're walking around, their cowboy boots up, and I'm just like, they even talk funny. And then I begin to think, okay, this is just the way of life in Tennessee. Y'alls and honeys and more other yonders. Okay, I get all those things. Everywhere we went was people that talked funny. And I just couldn't help but listen to it. Just the way that they talked. And everywhere we were just looking at these beautiful things, and then somebody would say something, I would look over and see what did they look like. And I tell you what, they had all these different imageries. People in business suits talk like that. People in just t-shirt and jeans and holes in them, they talk like that too. I thought everybody talked funny down here. My point in all this is not to make fun of the way that people talk, because I think it's really cool. It's not funny, it's cool. All right, you have an accent. I remember my wife and I, not to get off on a tangent here, we went to Seattle, Washington for our first year anniversary. And we walked in the store, and they said hello, and we said hi, and they said, would you like to sign our guest book? What makes you think I'm not from around here? I didn't say howdy, I just said hi, hello, and they said, you want to sign our guest book? You obviously, the way that your accent is, you are not from around here. My point in all this, too, is that if I decide to move to Tennessee and live in Tennessee, at some point, would I start talking like those people? My wife and I was just talking about the other day, of all the places in the world I would really love to go, okay, I don't want to go outside the U.S., but if I was going to go outside the U.S., I want to go to London, England, okay? And I thought for just a moment, if I go there and spend months, maybe years on end, and I come back home, would I talk like that? And I thought that is one of the coolest voices, in my opinion, accents, if you will, that I really, really liked. But why would I all of a sudden change the way I talk? Just because we're around the environment. We adapt to that environment. We adapt to that tongue, that lisp, whatever it be. That's what we're exposed to. That's what we hear. That's what we naturally partake on. We just do it, okay? Those kids that grow up, they hear mom and dad talk that way. That's how they talk, okay? If you have some other accent, an Asian, Chinese, Japanese, whatever it be, that's the accent you have. You ever know, do you have any friends that are Spanish, Mexican friends? I have several that I work with, obviously. You ever notice yourself talking to them and all of a sudden you start talking with that specific dialect that they have? I don't have it, but I notice every time I start talking to them about something, I have a tendency to talk like their dialect. Why? I don't speak Spanish and I'm not Mexican, but why do I do that? It's just something you do. It's what you hear, it's what you're around, and that's what partakes. Certain things in our life, there's no problem doing that. No big deal. No harm, no foul of adapting to that way of life. The more that you're exposed to it, the more that you're naturally going to do that, because that's what's in your ears and that's what's going to resonate eventually. However, we have to warn ourselves that we adapt to the negative things in life. The things that we see, the things that we experience, the things that we hear, at some point that's going to become who we are. If you go and you work in an employer and you are the only Christian there and there's 100 other people that talk like drunken sailors, is the term here, at some point you're going to talk like them. It's 100-to-1 influence, and at some point you will talk to them. If your agenda is to go in there and start saving 100 people, I really wish you the best. And you really have to have a strong faith and a strong background and real self-control to do that. But if you don't, at some point you're going to start being like them. And if you think in one day that you're going to walk in there and influence all 100, we're really in trouble here. The point is to start singling somebody out here and there, here and there, here and there, and start talking to them. That we don't engage ourselves in such a capacity that we engage into who they are. And that's the warning that we have. I do work in a manufacturing environment. I have been around operators that are unbelievers. And I have been around such a multitude of them that it's difficult at some point. And if you're spending endless days working overtime and spending every day of your life there more than you do at church or even at home, you're going to start acting like them. You're going to start thinking just like them. Their influence may be greater than yours, depending on our influence back to them. If you're somebody that likes to preach the gospel and really talk about Jesus to people, hopefully you'll have an influence on them. But if you're a little shy about the gospel and you're a little reserved about your Christianity and you don't really out there influencing people with the Word of God, they're going to influence you greatly. You're going to become friends with them and you're going to allow them to influence you. Why? Because again, that's what you see and that's what you hear. Things on TV, the things our kids are exposed to. They go to school, they're around certain kids, all of a sudden they come home and they say certain words. And you're like, where did you hear that from? Why would you ever say that? We don't do that in our home. Why would you adapt to that? Because that's the environment, unfortunately, that they're in. It's called the world, a worldly environment. But notice what Paul does here. He's going to go into this world of a multitude of people who are sinners, and he says this. He says, I make myself a slave in verse 19 to all, not just specific people, but to all, so that I may win more. I'm going to change something about me a little bit here. First of all, he's going to be Christ-like. But he's going to change something about him just a little bit so that he has the ability to go to certain groups. He's not going to do it in a sinful way. He's not going to put himself in a situation where he has to become sin so that he can obviously influence people. You know, if I'm going to go talk to somebody about quitting smoking, I don't start lighting a cigarette and have a conversation with them about quitting smoking. He says, I'm going to make myself a slave. I'm going to deny certain things so that I may win more here. Again, there's the purpose. Verse 20, to the Jews I became a Jew so that I might win Jews. To those who are under law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law, and then law. He says, I'm going to go to the people who are under the law. Okay, I'm not going to put myself under that law, but I'm going to go to those people under the law. Now, I might do some things according to the law so that I can engage with them, maybe the traditions and sacrifices to some measure, but not so much that I'm a believer in that salvation. But I'm going to go engage with them in such a capacity that I can influence them of Christ, to teach them about it. So it's a minor version of fellowship. It's not engaging with them so that you can show that what they're doing is okay and acceptable. But it's entering into fellowship in such a way that we have a barrier that we don't go too far because we don't want to be influenced to go their way. You know, I can go to work and I can have conversations with people, but I don't have to go in their homes and engage in all the sinful acts that they do. Okay, there's got to be this barrier. I can invite them in my home so that I have a better influence on them than go to their home and unfortunately have an influence on me. In verse 22, he says, to the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, again, so that I may by all means save some. It's the spiritual adaptation. First of all, we have to go from a worldly mindset, a worldly habit. Get into Christ. Get into the church. Read the gospel. Let it change your life. Grow in faith. Grow in that strength. Grow in that love. You cannot, as an infant in Christ, barely learn about Christ and go out and change the world. The world will have influence on you. The thing is, you know the difference. You know how strong your faith really is. If anyone has ever drank alcohol and they decide that I'm going to give up drinking alcohol, the very next day they cannot walk into a bar. The likelihood of them drinking alcohol is tremendous all over again. If they've struggled with alcohol for many, many, many years and decide to stop alcohol, and let's say they go 5 years without drinking alcohol, and they thought one day, I'm going to walk in a bar. Again, what are the odds of you starting to drink alcohol again? Very high. Why is that? Because again, the environment that you are in, that's what a bar's for, to drink alcohol. Okay, people can say there's socialism, there's dartboards and pool tables. The reason why you go to a bar is to drink. Point being, don't go to the bar. Find other alternatives of places you can go and meet and socialize with other people. Don't put yourself in an area or a habitat that you know you will fail. I don't care how strong you think you are. If you go to an environment that you failed once, it's the likelihood that you're going to fail again. And I always think about Peter. When Jesus told Peter that you will deny me. Okay? Peter said, I won't deny you. In fact, I will die for you. What happened to Peter? He denied. He thought his strength and faith in Jesus was so great that there's nothing in this world that can make him fail. And I hope we feel the same way about our strength. But be very careful that we don't literally go into a lion's den in a sense, and that we're going to be enticed to fail. Our spiritual adaptation has to be in such a way that we find ourselves with Christians. We're in a spiritual environment always. Don't go places where there's sinful things. Don't watch things that has potential sinfulness to it. If you're going to turn on the television, the likelihood of you seeing sin is great. Be very careful what television shows you decide to watch. Again, places that you're going to go. What am I going to see? Who am I going to see? We didn't know the other day when we ran the drumstick dash that me and Dylan and Gene were going to see the two men half naked and only in underwear. Had no idea we would see that. If we did, trust me, wouldn't have gone. Okay? I don't want to really run this thing. Okay? But now we know next time. Okay? So anyhow, sometimes you are surprised on certain things and you have no choice. But again, you do have the choice of what you do when you see it or experience those things. We have to pick and choose where we go and what we do. Again, there has to be a reason and a purpose that we want to adapt to spiritual things and not simple things first and foremost. We have to safeguard ourselves. As much as we really want to go out in the world and we want to change people and influence them and encourage them, the number one person we always have to watch out for is us. We have to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. Again, I know someone's struggling. They're sinning, and I want to go to them and encourage them. But what about their attitude towards us and towards what we're talking about? Maybe they're going to get all upset about what we're doing. And we know that every time we talk to this person, we get upset. So we probably ought not to talk to that person until we can figure something out. Maybe take someone else with us to help them in the conversation. We know these things, again, ahead of time. Paul says there's a reason why I do these things. I'm going to adapt my life in such a capacity, and again, it's in a righteous, a truthful way, so that I may by all means save some. In other words, I can't save everybody. I'm going to go to this group. I'm going to hopefully adapt to this group and change this group. Okay, if I got to talk like a Tennessean to save some Tennesseans, let's do that. Okay? If I have to go over here and adapt my life a little bit, change my structure, change my habits, go without things, let's do that. Paul was going to walk in there and people are eating meat sacrificed to idols. If that's the case, then let's eat meats. If somebody's abstaining from meats, then I'll abstain from meats. We're going to adapt to certain things that are non-simple things so that we have a chance to influence other people. And in verse 23, I do all things for the sake of the gospel, so that I may become a fellow partaker of it. The ultimate reason why he does anything is for Jesus Christ. First and foremost, himself. And second of all, why do I care about you? Because I want to influence you and encourage you to come into Christ. I see that you are not spiritually adapted. Maybe something in the world has influenced you. Maybe the environment we're in has influenced you. The workplace that we're in has influenced you. Other worldly things has influenced you. Television, social media has influenced you. I can jump on social media and I can adapt to social media. Okay? But I might go to social media to win somebody over. Maybe there's somebody that's posting negative things and comments on social media. I'm not going to jump in there and start commenting on their stuff. Maybe I'll go to them in private. Say, hey, your viewpoint on this is a little sinful here. Okay? But I'm doing all things for the sake of the gospel, for Christ. So that I may become a fellow partaker of myself. Now, I thought about this verse for a moment. He's becoming all these things for other people. Okay? He could sit there and say, I'm a Christian, I'm good, I got myself, I'm all right. I've adapted to Christ, I'm following Jesus Christ, I'm good, and I'm saved. I'm done. But he goes the extra mile because he realizes it's not just about him. The spiritual adaptation, he recognizes how he got there in the first place. He realizes that he is the chief of the sinners and that he's only there by the grace of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ chose him to carry out his message, and a man who was unworthy to do so. And he recognizes this, that I'm a simple man, Jesus Christ has saved me and has appointed me to go out and spread his gospel. He's done that for all of us. As we come from a sinful state in a worldly measure, we've adapted to Christ, we have put on Christ, we are now a Christian. That's not just it. It isn't just now time out all of a sudden. Now we have the obligation, the privilege, the responsibility to go out into the world to save others. That we now can go to them. That we can change their lives. You have something about you that other people don't have. That you can go to certain people that other people can't. And you have an influenceability on them. Somebody else here in the workplace, they're just an angry person. You know what? They may be a person who's a Christian, but they have no idea how to encourage people and bring them to the gospel. Maybe you have a sympathetic side of you. Maybe you have struggled with some sin that they're struggling with. Maybe you have a calming demeanor. Maybe you have the strength and you also have the courage to go to them and point stuff out. But do it in a humble way that you know how it's going to influence them. You became something for them so that you might save them. And that's exactly what Paul is doing here, but again, he does it with a purpose. And I'll bring this to a close tonight. He says, do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Therefore I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air. But I discipline my body and make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified. Obviously, I've ran some marathons, and you guys know that. There's a purpose for that, okay? I have to think about why on earth, when anybody in their right mind would ever want to run 26.2 miles. And the reason why I did it, all the training hours and all the session, putting my body all through that abuse, it all came down to a t-shirt and a medal. Yes. Got it. And I got it. I went through all that grueling pain, ice baths, eating certain food, running in the rain, just brutal, falling over every training session, going and running, again, the Boston Marathon. It was 32 degrees. It rained the whole time, and it blew in my face the entire way. And when I got to the finish line, I forgot about all of it. The moment this young lady put that medal around my neck. And I said, yes, I got it. That was 2018. And now sits on a shelf collecting dust. So again, what was the purpose? Oh well. You know what? We do things for some reasons, and then later on we're like, it was pointless. No, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got it. Because it wasn't really about the medal in the end. Because now I look back at that experience and why I did it, I know what it did for me in my life. It helped me conquer certain things in my life. It knows that I set out, I had a challenge, and I met the challenge, and I did it. I overcame it. I spent many, many, many mornings on runs just listening to, well, I actually downloaded a Bible book one time and listened to the entire Bible one time. Not in one run, but through several runs I did. I would praise God in my runs. And it was just amazing how closer I felt to creation those things. So I gathered a lot more things out of it than just the medal and the t-shirt. Those things will obviously wither away, but it was my experience that what matters. The other day, I started boxing again in my garage as far as my fitness workout. And I looked at my life and I said, why am I doing this? Is it because I want to jump in a ring and beat somebody up and I want to do this for a profession? No, there's a purpose. And so I went out in the garage the other day and I started boxing in this bag, and I thought, why am I doing this? Okay, what is my intent? Is it so that one day if some mugger comes up to me and my family that I can take care of our family and I can defend my family? Nope. Is it so I can just get out some anger that's been tied up in my life and I just want to beat something? Nope. Is it just because I'm bored and there's nothing else better to do in the house? Nope. But why am I doing this in the first place? Because it's fun. Simple matter. Part of a diet program. This is a cardio workout. That's what it is. I think that doing this is a cardio workout that's going to help me, again, lose some weight, lose some calories, and I think it's a fun way of doing it. I don't like to run 26.2 miles anymore, so if I'm going to get my heart rate up or something, I'm going to go punch something. And it's just fun. It has nothing to do with anger, has nothing to do with defending my family, has nothing to do with it. It's just a fun way of losing calories. And that's what I did. Again, the purpose in this is that there's a purpose. A lot of what we do in life has no spiritual purpose. We just think it's fun to do. It's just what we like to do. But again, there's no spiritual reason why we do it. What Paul is doing here, the reason why he says, I become a slave, the reason why I'm going to do this, has a spiritual benefit. It isn't just because I think it's fun. It isn't just because I want the praise of man to do it. It's not out there because I'm going to get a paycheck and doing it in some capacity. It's not so that people will praise me and bow down for the rest of my life. It's so that I will save people from going to hell. The reason why you change your life and you adapt to spiritual things is first and foremost for you. The reason why you continue to do that and take that to people is with a defined purpose, and it's again to safeguard your soul and theirs. So when we look at who we are in a mirror, and we say, who is Kevin? What is Kevin projecting? I have a 10-year-old boy with me tonight. He sees everything that I do. He is literally my mini-me. He follows me everywhere. We do everything together. He sees the real me in everything that I am. And I'm thankful for that. It safeguards my actions, my words, and everything that I do. And I want to influence him to someday maybe to stand up here and do exactly what I'm doing tonight. The reason why we do everything has a divine purpose. Not just a mediocre purpose, not a personal purpose. It has to be a divine purpose. Who I'm going to be when I wake up today is I'm going to be a Christian for God. I'm going to put on Christ in my activity. I'm going to put on Christ in the things that I say. I'm going to put on Christ in the things that I think and do and everything else in my life. In hopes that I'll influence my wife, my children, my co-workers, everybody around me. Again, I do so for a divine purpose. In verse 25, everyone who competes in the game exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. Everything I'm going to do, I'm going to adapt to my words, I'm going to adapt to my actions. It all is for Christ. The thing that we have to do every single day, and I mean every single day, is we have to look in the mirror and say, who are we? What do other people see? What do they hear come from my voice? Are they being encouraged or discouraged? Are they seeing righteous acts or sinful acts? Paul says this, verse 27, I discipline my body and I make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified. As you encourage everybody else around you to all the capacity that you are, you safeguard your life so that they do not encourage you into sinfulness. He says, I discipline my body. To discipline your body is going to make yourself do things that you naturally don't want to do. You know what? There's an opportunity over here to encourage somebody. Well, I've got other things to do. Those other things can wait. This soul needs saved now. Not later, now. We push off so many opportunities in life because we think about ourselves. We make our bodies a slave. Our body says, I want to do this. I want to partake of that. I want to engage into that because it is fun. Look at all these people and all the joy that they have. It obviously is fun. But you know what you know, and you know that it's not fun. It's sinful. And we have to reject those things. And by rejecting those things is also a voice. When you have a multitude of people that says, come on, Kevin, let's go over here and do this. And my answer is no. That's a voice. That's not who I am. That's not what I'm a part of. And that's not who I'm going to be. In closing, in 2 Corinthians 13, Paul writes, "Test yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Examine yourselves. Or do you not recognize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail the test? But I trust that you will realize that we ourselves do not fail the test." Spiritual adaptation. I could sit there and I could talk to my wife all day long, and I tell her, "You know what? I don't talk like them Tennesseans." And then I can listen to a recording of myself. I'm like, man, I've really got a Lebtuckian accent. And that's what we grew up thinking, right? We got the Lebtuckian accent, right? You know, sometimes we don't realize certain things about ourselves. We can go months, weeks, years. We could slowly adapt into something that's sinful, something that's not characteristic of Christ, and may not even recognize it at first. Maybe that's because we're not testing ourselves. Maybe because we're not looking at the Word of God and comparing ourselves. Not so much that we think we deserve something, but are we Christ? Have we put on Christ? Are we truly doing spiritual things? And you know the answer to that. But sometimes, again, we can go a length of time but not realize, and all of a sudden my wife is over here saying, "Kevin, stop doing that." "I'm sorry, honey, I didn't realize I was doing that." Thank you for pointing that out to me and for pulling me back. You again have the same opportunity to do that to a brother and sister. Point something out that they don't recognize. Maybe they're just oblivious to it. Maybe they do know it. Maybe they're oblivious. Test yourselves. Examine yourselves. But recognize that Jesus Christ is in you, and that's who you are. You're not a sinner. You're not of the world. You're not doing worldly things. You are a Christian. You belong to Christ. So what comes out of your mouth, what comes out of your way of life, is Christ-like things. You push aside the old way of life in baptism, and you are this new creature in Jesus Christ. That's who you are. That's not who I want to be. That's not what I'm going to be. I'm going to live for Christ. And by doing that, I'm going to encourage other people, and I'm going to lead them to Christ. I'm not going to adapt to the old way of life. I'm not going to adapt to this world. I'm going to adapt to Christian things. And by doing that, we make our bodies, we make our lives a slave to Christ and not simple things. The invitation is for anyone tonight. To give your life to Jesus Christ, to be baptized for those sins, or even come forward for prayers. If that is for you tonight, may you come forward now as we stand and sing.